Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we're going to work on a Penn Reels Silver Series reel. It's the model 103. It was manufactured in the late 80s and 90s. It's made in Japan. It was one of the first reels that Penn had sent overseas for manufacture, and it competed, and it even looks like the Daiwa Silver Series and the Ryobis of the day. So it's a metal cased reel, single ball bearing. It's the medium-sized reel, so it's got a one ball bearing, holds about 250 yards of 12-pound test, and we'll take it apart. We'll show you how to service this reel, show you what it's made of, and if you have one, follow along and it'll help you tune the reel up. Okay, so we're going to start by taking off the handle and the gear side plate. The handle comes out with a clockwise turn opposite your crank, which is counterclockwise. I'm also going to take the spool off at this point. Now normally you don't have to take the spool off to service, except that I'm going to show you how to service the drag washers, and in order to do that you need to pull the spool. This reel has been around a while, single ball bearing, and very dependable and very reliable. So if you find one in a used status, I would recommend that you pick it up and do a little bit of maintenance on it and put it back into use, because it will last a lifetime if properly serviced. I think there's a lot of fans out there. It's not a complicated technology. As a matter of fact, when we open up the inside of this, you're going to see that it's one of the simpler technologies in reels, but it was probably appropriate for the time. Now I laid those screws down on my table. Usually what I will do is I will put them right into my parts basket, and I always use a parts basket particularly for the small screws, but I laid it out to see if the screws were the same size, and they're not. There's two longer screws and a shorter screw, and that's not unusual for side plates, but you'll notice the one on the right is smaller than the other two, and I noticed the sequence I took it out, and this one came out of the bottom hole. And sometimes the manufacturers will do that because of clearances and design. So when you're taking off a side plate, always make sure that you note the ones that came out and where they came out of, so that when you go to reinstall, you have them in the right place and don't cause the reel to bind or do something, crack a side plate or something trying to tighten down on something that won't tighten down. Okay, as I mentioned, we have a metal reel made in Japan, single ball bearing, which means the two sides have bushings in them. In this case, they're rubber or plastic bushings. That's a side plate shim. And I'm going to take that off as is, put that into my parts basket. And we're going to go ahead and get to the cross-wind shaft that makes the spool go up and down. And the technology for the time is pretty similar to the Daiwas and the like. It's not very complicated at all. It does not use a crosswind gear. Instead, it uses an offset with a crosswind arm on the main gear, and it eliminates much of the modern ones that you see today that have a main gear that has a front and a back gear, a smaller gear on the back of the main that drives a crosswind gear that makes that spool shaft go up and down. So this one's pretty simple. In order to remove the crosswind arm, you simply take that shim off, and then you can just pull up and remove the crosswind arm. Again, two different sides on this, so just make a mental note on that. There's a shiny or a chrome side, and then there's a more of a matte or satin finish. The matte satin finish was the one that was sitting up against the main gear. So when you go to reinstall, again, mental notes. So if you've got one of these apart, if you don't remember how you took this thing apart to begin with, if you're trying to put it back together and use this video to do that, we'll show you how to do that and point out some things that can help you as you take other reels apart in the future. But one of the best things to do is to get a schematic of the reel. In this case, I pulled the 103C, which is the later edition of the reel, because this one actually has parts from the 103C in it. The main difference on the 103C is in that crosswind block, and we have a crosswind block rather than an arm that has a fork on the bottom for that. So if you pulled your crosswind arm out and you found that it had an extension on the back that looked like a U-clip which is where your pin came out of, then you have the 100, not the the 103, not the 103C. All right, in order to pull the shaft, you just simply remove that pin, and now you're seeing the value of that parts bucket because there are a lot of small pieces and parts there. This does not have a gear on the back, so you can simply remove the main gear. I'm just going to set that on the workbench for now. This is the crosswind block that I just pulled the pin from. Crosswind shaft. I'm just simply pull up on the crosswind shaft. That will remove the shaft from the assembly. And then notice the position of this block. It's real easy if you don't pay attention to turn that block upside down like this when you go to reinstall, and you'll be able to do that actually. But what will happen, unfortunately, is it'll hit here and you'll short spool and the reel will jam. So take pictures along the way. If you don't have that schematic, or if that schematic is difficult to read and you're involved in doing the maintenance on the reel, take a picture. Use your digital camera, use your cell phone, use something else along the way, video like we are recording here, and that way you'll have a reference point in terms of the sequence that came off and positioning of those pieces and parts. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking off the rotor. I'm just going to examine the inside. We're not going to go ahead and pull the bearing and everything at this point because it is a simple tune-up, but I just want to make sure it's clean. It is clean, but what you're going to notice here is it's an old school technology with the anti-reverse. This is your anti-reverse dog, anti-reverse spring, anti-reverse ratchet. I'm just going to pull that ratchet off for a moment, show you underneath. And this is sort of an eccentric kind of a thing. As you move your reel, this will break in and out. That'll cause your dog to move back and forward. Right now, I guess that's, there you go. So you'll see that this will trip from centrifugal force, and that'll cause that to go. Now, back to, for a moment, taking that picture. It's real easy, if you didn't take that picture, to put this ratchet in this way, and this ratchet will not work because the anti-reverse dog will be backwards. So just make sure that you take your pictures and understand the right side, and that's the way that would set up. Okay, this has a single ball bearing. I'm not going to remove it for the purposes of this video. If you needed to remove the ball bearing or the pinion shaft, there are 2 screws here. Pull that and this whole assembly will just lift off. Right now I'm just going to lubricate that. That's what we're doing here, a general tune-up on the reel. I'm going to use an oil designed for fishing reels. I recommend you do as well. In this case I'm using Reelex as the oil. There are plenty of reel oils on the market. Here's another example here, Laker reel oil. And of course each manufacturer tends to have reel oil as well. Here's Abu Garcia reel oil and so on. So just use an oil designed for fishing reels as opposed to a general purpose 3-in-1 oil or the like. The reason I say that is it will last longer and it has been designed for fishing reels, so you know that you will have your best foot going forward. Okay, so we put the oil on the shaft. That's going to reach the bearing, but I'll also show you that you can oil the bearing from underneath if you like. You wouldn't need to pull the rotor here. We're just going to just trying to get this started. Some of you that watch my videos, there we go, know that I have a little bit of problem with nuts and bolts and things, small screws. Okay, so I just tightened that down. This is a 13mm nut. We're just going to tighten that up. We're going to spin it to make sure that it spins right. And we're just going to make sure that the anti-reverse is operating, which it is. Okay, checking the main pinion gear now. I want to make sure that all the teeth on this gear are in order, that there's none that are broken, chipped, warped, or out of alignment somehow. It's a shame to go tune up a reel to find out that you had a broken part in there and have to go do it all over again. For this I use a reel grease. In this case I'm using a Penn Precision reel grease. Again, like those oils, there's plenty of manufacturers out there that do reel grease. Just make sure that you get one that's designed for fishing reels. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just putting the grease onto that pinion gear. We're going to turn our attention to the main gear now. So we're going to do the same thing here that we did with the other. We're going to just kind of brush it off, make sure that we have clear channels and that all of the teeth in that main gear are doing what they should be doing, that there's none bent, chipped, broken, or missing. In this case, it's fine. I'll take a little bit of the blue grease and put that onto the shaft of the main gear so that it has lubrication on the bushings. We'll do the same thing on this side. A little bit on the faceplate of the main drive and a little bit onto the shaft. And then we're going to reinstall the main gear. And we're going to grab the spool shaft and crosswind block. And remember, we took a look there on how that worked, and this is the lower case here. And we should be able to just simply insert the crosswind shaft or spool shaft into that crosswind block. Then you want to line up the hole in the shaft with the hole in the crosswind block. I use a simple pin. It's actually part of an old tool set that I had that featured an awl. And we're going to go put that crosswind pin in there. Next up is the crosswind arm. We pointed that out earlier, that the crosswind arm has a shiny side and a matte side. And when we took it off, the matte side was against the gear. And you can actually see it. Well, I can see it. It may be difficult on here. But there's a little bit of scraping from where the crosswind arm actually rubbed against the side plates of the gear, which is okay. That may be a reminder. But again, get the schematic, take your pictures if necessary, but make sure that you know how the pieces and parts go back in. With that, there were two shims that went on this side. That shim kind of holds the arm in place, and it also acts as a washer against the other bearing. I'm going to go ahead and put that side plate back on now. And we had the three screws. The two of them were long. They went up top. And one was short. That went below. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we got them in the right places. And these screws have both a Phillips head configuration, but they also have a slot that's through. So you can use a flat-bladed screwdriver if you like. I'm often asked, what about a mechanical screwdriver, a battery-operated one? And my suggestion is, if you can do it by hand, do it by hand. If you have issues where it's difficult to do by hand, go ahead and use the mechanicals. I find that there is some danger in those mechanicals, and I don't recommend them because of the torque on them. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put the handle back in now. Yeah, we got a nice smooth operating wheel there. Okay, before we get done then, we want to just service the top of this, which is the reel. And I told you earlier, I took this spool off because I want to make sure that the drags are properly serviced. In order to do that, we're going to go pull the spring clip that's in the center of the spool. This is what it looks like. There's various configurations of spring clips for spinning reels, but almost all of the spinning reels will have a groove cut in the top channel. It'll hold it in by some kind of a spring clip, and then there'll be a series of washers. In this case, it looks like these are Teflon washers, which are plastic washers, which are self-lubricating. So we really don't need to do anything with them other than make sure that they're clean and wiped down. And in this case, I'm seeing a little bit of grit and grime in that channel. So I want to make sure that we clean that up. So I'm just going to grab a cotton swab to do that. And for the most part, this top spool drag system always takes the brunt of all of the water and the like that goes on here. So you want to make sure that's clean so that you have the best operating drags available. Okay, this is the way that the drag system sets up. It has a Teflon washer, metal washer, Teflon washer. The middle washer always has the tabbed, keyed, or sometimes referred to as an ear washer. That fits in a slot in the spool here. Then the last of the Teflon, last of the metal before that spring clip. So we're just going to go ahead and put those back in. These are clean. The channel has been cleaned. There's no need for grease because these are Teflon washers. If they were felt washers, you would oil the felt washer. If it was a fabric washer like a Carbonex, you would put drag grease on them. But in this case, it's just a Teflon washer. It kind of self-lubricated and nothing needed further on that. Okay, So once we do that, we sit that spring clip back into the grooves in the channel. We're done. Just simply going to put that spool back on. Going to put the drag knob back on. And we're going to put some line on this reel and we're going to go fishing. So I hope that that's showed you that even though it's an older technology, it's still a nice reel. It's an uncomplicated reel, so a lot of things, there's less things to break on the reel. It's durable, it has the metal casing, it has a single ball bearing, which is fine, and it's ready for another season of fishing before it gets tuned up again. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like it. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe, as I post frequently with the reels that come into my shop. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.